Sign it, Charlotte, or 42,000 people lose their jobs before sunrise. Miriam Sloan placed the marriage certificate on the polished table as thunder rolled beyond the glass walls of the Ashford Grand Hotel. 7 minutes remained before the board of Ashford Aeronautics voted to remove Charlotte Ashford from the company her family had built. Hundreds of reporters waited outside the ballroom. Investors whispered beneath crystal chandeliers. And beside Charlotte stood the man her grandfather had ordered her to marry, Elias Bennett, a poor single father in a rented suit, worn shoes, and an expression far too calm for someone about to become the most ridiculed husband in America. "How much?" Charlotte asked. Eli looked at her. "Excuse me. Everyone has a price. Name yours." A few executives nearby exchanged amused smiles. The rain moved across the windows in silver streams, and 9-year-old Lucy Bennett stood near the doorway, holding a faded blue dress that had belonged to her mother. Eli glanced at his daughter before answering. "I do not want your money." Laughter rippled through the room. No one there knew that the man they were mocking could have purchased the hotel, the airline that brought them there, and every company represented in the ballroom without asking a bank for permission. Charlotte narrowed her eyes. She had spent 15 years learning how to read ambition. She recognized greed hidden behind charity, betrayal hidden behind loyalty, and hunger hidden behind expensive smiles. Yet Eli gave her nothing. No nervousness. No excitement. No attempt to impress her. "You expect me to believe you are doing this out of kindness?" she asked. "No," Eli replied. "I expect you to believe whatever makes signing easier." Miriam checked her watch. 5 minutes. Above them, members of the board were gathering to hand control of Ashford Aeronautics to Malcolm Rourke, Charlotte's former fiancé and current chief financial officer. If the marriage was not legally completed before the vote, the controlling shares in her grandfather's trust would pass to the board. Malcolm would own the deciding voice. Factories would close. Pensions would disappear. 42,000 families would wake to uncertainty. Charlotte picked up the pen. "There will be rules," she said. "There always are. This is not a real marriage. Then do not ask me to make real promises." Her jaw tightened. For the first time that evening, someone looked at Charlotte Ashford without fear, admiration, or need. He looked at her as though the title attached to her name weighed less than the choice she was about to make. The ballroom doors opened, and Malcolm entered with 3 board members behind him. "Still searching for a husband?" he called. "You should hurry. Poverty looks impatient." More laughter followed. Eli did not turn around. He simply placed one steady hand on the table beside Lucy, creating a quiet wall between his daughter and the cruelty in the room. Charlotte saw the gesture. Something inside her paused. "1 minute," Miriam warned. Charlotte signed. Eli signed beneath her name. The clock struck 9, and the laughter died as Miriam raised the certificate. The marriage is legal. At that exact moment, Eli's old phone lit inside his jacket. He glanced down at a message no one else could see. "Mr. North, the global acquisition funds are awaiting your authorization." Eli pressed the screen dark, lifted his eyes toward the people who believed he had just married above his station, and said nothing. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Share your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, please like this video and subscribe. These stories can spark change, and we are grateful you are here. 3 days earlier, Charlotte Ashford had entered Miriam Sloan's law office expecting a routine reading of her grandfather's final trust amendment. She left believing Theodore Ashford had reached beyond the grave to control the one part of her life she had never allowed anyone to touch. "Marriage," Charlotte said. "To a stranger?" Miriam folded her hands over the leather-bound will. "To Elias Bennett." "Who is he?" "The man your grandfather selected." "That is not an answer." Rain tapped against the 32nd floor windows while traffic moved below like ribbons of red and white. Light. On the table between them rested a photograph of a quiet man in work clothes standing beside a little girl. Nothing about him suggested influence, education, or wealth. That, Charlotte decided, was probably the point. "If you remain unmarried when the board meets Friday night," Miriam explained, "the trust transfers its voting shares to the directors for 12 months. Charlotte's face hardened. "Malcolm controls 6 of them. 7 by tomorrow morning. Then my grandfather handed him the company." Miriam shook her head. "Your grandfather believed this marriage would prevent that." Charlotte looked again at the photograph. "He believed a mechanic could protect an aerospace corporation. He believed character could." 2 hours later, Charlotte's black sedan stopped outside a small generator repair shop on the industrial edge of Cleveland. The building leaned beneath a rusted sign. Wind pushed old receipts across the cracked parking lot, and the smell of oil and cold metal drifted through the open service door. Inside, Eli Bennett knelt beside a portable generator, tightening a corroded connection with careful hands. Lucy sat nearby doing homework beneath a hanging work lamp. "Elias Bennett?" Charlotte asked. He looked up once. "Depends who is asking." "Charlotte Ashford." "I know." That unsettled her more than surprise would have. She placed a cashier's check on his workbench. "My grandfather named you in his will. I need you to marry me for 1 year. That amount should compensate you." Eli wiped his hands on a cloth but did not touch the check. "How many zeros?" "Enough to change your life." "Then take it back." Charlotte gave a humorless laugh. "Pride is expensive when you have a child." The shop grew still. Lucy lowered her pencil. Eli's eyes did not rise in anger, but something in his silence made Charlotte regret the sentence before he spoke. "My daughter has never gone hungry, Miss Ashford. She has never gone to sleep wondering whether her father would come home. Do not confuse an old truck with a failed life." Charlotte pushed the check closer. "Everyone needs something." Eli tore it cleanly in half. "Not that." She should have left. Instead, she told him about Malcolm, the board vote, and the factories marked for closure. She told him about 23 facilities across 6 states, pension funds tied to the company, and 42,000 employees whose livelihoods could disappear under a ruthless restructuring plan. Eli's expression changed only when she mentioned the workers. He looked toward Lucy. She was wearing a faded sweater and quietly counting coins beside a pharmacy receipt. "How long?" he asked. 1 year. "Separate rooms?" "Obviously. My daughter comes with me." "That can be arranged." Eli studied Charlotte as if the answer had already been decided somewhere beyond her understanding. Then he folded the torn check and placed it back into her hand. "I will marry you," he said, "but not for your money." Outside, Charlotte's driver opened the car door, never noticing the dark sedan parked across the street. Inside it, a man in a charcoal coat raised his phone and whispered, "We found Mr. North." The dark sedan remained across the street until Charlotte's car disappeared into the rain, but Eli never looked toward it. He gathered Lucy's schoolbooks, locked the repair shop, and drove home in the same aging pickup Charlotte had mistaken for proof of failure. By the following afternoon, that truck was climbing the long private road to the Ashford estate, its engine humming beneath rows of bare maple trees. The house rose ahead of them in glass, limestone, and steel, more like a monument than a home. Lucy pressed her face near the window. "Do people really live there?" Eli glanced at the cold reflection of the sky across the windows. "Sometimes people live inside places without ever feeling at home." Charlotte waited beneath the front entrance with Miriam and a line of staff members. Her tailored gray coat matched the winter light, and her expression suggested that even hospitality had been scheduled. "You are late," she said. Eli checked the dashboard clock. "We are 4 minutes early." "Then my staff was told the wrong time." "That sounds like a staff problem." Nora Callahan, the longtime housekeeper, lowered her eyes to hide a smile. Charlotte turned and walked inside. "There are rules. You will not speak to the press without approval. You will not enter my office. You will not involve yourself in company matters. Public appearances will be scheduled, and affection will be limited to what is necessary." Eli carried Lucy's suitcase through the marble entryway. "Anything else?" "Do not mistake this arrangement for a family." Lucy's hand tightened around his. Eli looked at Charlotte calmly. "Children hear more than adults think." The silence that followed was brief, but it changed the temperature of the room. Charlotte led them upstairs, where an entire private suite had been prepared for Eli. It held a king-sized bed, custom suits, polished shoes, and a watch displayed beneath soft lighting. On the desk sat a new phone, keys to a black luxury sport utility vehicle, and a bank card linked to an account bearing his name. Eli set the keys down. "I will use my truck. Your truck leaks oil. Then I will fix it." He left the suits untouched, returned the watch to its case, and chose a small guest room at the end of the hall because it stood closest to Lucy's room. Charlotte watched him carry his own bags past thousands of dollars worth of clothing without giving them a second glance. Greedy men tried to hide their hunger. Eli seemed not to possess any. That night, the estate settled into a silence broken only by the low hum of the heating system and the wind brushing against the windows. Charlotte was returning from her office when she noticed light beneath Lucy's door. She expected to find the child awake. Instead, Eli sat cross-legged on the floor beneath a small lamp, holding a faded cloth rabbit in one hand and a sewing needle in the other. One ear had torn almost completely away. His stitches were uneven, but his attention was patient. Charlotte leaned against the doorway. There are stores in Cleveland that sell better ones. Eli did not look up. This one belonged to her mother. You could have it professionally restored. Lucy woke up crying. She did not need a professional. She needed her father. Charlotte's gaze moved toward the sleeping child, then back to the worn rabbit. Some things are easier to replace. Eli pulled the final thread tight and gently smoothed the repaired ear. Some things are not expensive, he said. They are simply irreplaceable. Charlotte stood very still. Her eyes drifted toward the empty hallway behind her, toward a house filled with priceless objects and not one person who had ever waited outside her door when she was afraid. Eli placed the rabbit beside Lucy, tucked the blanket beneath her chin, and switched off the lamp. As he passed Charlotte, he offered no explanation and asked for no sympathy. But for the first time since meeting him, she did not see a poor man chosen by a dead man's will. She saw a father who understood the true cost of losing something money could never bring back. The following evening, the Ashford estate filled with senators, investors, military contractors, and executives who had learned to measure a human being by the value of his last transaction. Crystal glasses chimed beneath warm chandeliers. A string quartet played near the staircase, and every conversation seemed to pause when Eli entered wearing one of his own dark suits instead of the designer clothing Charlotte had provided. Lucy walked beside him in a simple blue dress, holding his hand with quiet confidence. Charlotte noticed immediately. You refused the tailor. My suit fits. That is not the point. Then the point is probably too expensive. Before she could answer, Malcolm Rourke approached with a champagne glass and a smile polished by years of practiced cruelty. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, drawing the attention of those nearby. Allow me to introduce Charlotte's newest charitable acquisition. A few guests laughed. Malcolm looked Eli over slowly. Tell me, Bennett, does the marriage contract include lessons in table manners? Or are those billed separately? Eli said nothing. Perhaps we should begin with wine, Malcolm continued, lifting a bottle from a server's tray. Can you identify the vintage? Eli studied the label. No, Malcolm's smile widened. Of course not. But I can tell the bottle was stored too warm, Eli added. The cork has expanded, and the wine will taste flat. The sommelier examined it, then quietly removed the bottle. The laughter faded, but Malcolm was already searching for another target. A sharp electronic alarm sounded from the exhibition hall, where Ashford Aeronautics had displayed a prototype navigation system for the guests. Screens went dark. A young maintenance technician named Mateo Alvarez rushed toward the control panel, his face pale. I checked everything this afternoon, he said. The system was stable. Malcolm turned on him immediately. You were responsible for the installation? Yes, sir, but someone changed the access settings. Security, Malcolm called. Escort him out. His employment ends tonight. Mateo's hands trembled. Please, Mr. Rourke. My wife is expecting our second child. I did not do this. Then you should have done your job. Eli stepped between Mateo and the approaching guards. Give him a minute. Malcolm stared at him. This does not concern you. A man losing his livelihood over a guest concerns anyone with a conscience. Mateo whispered something under his breath in Spanish, too quickly for most of the room to understand. Eli answered him in the same language, calm and fluent. Mateo looked up in surprise, then described a warning message he had seen before the system failed. Eli moved to the control panel, studied the wiring, and opened a hidden diagnostics menu. His fingers traveled across the controls with the confidence of someone who had seen far more advanced systems than this one. The failure was not caused by installation, he said. Someone entered through an executive access account at 7:42 this evening and disabled the cooling safeguards. Charlotte stepped closer. Can you identify the account? Eli turned the screen toward her. The authorization belonged to Malcolm's office. Silence moved through the hall faster than any accusation. Malcolm's face tightened. My credentials were copied. Maybe, Eli said. Then Mateo deserves an apology while you investigate. Every eye shifted toward Malcolm. He forced the words through a rigid smile. There may have been a misunderstanding. Eli closed the panel and helped Mateo to his feet. He did not ask for praise. He did not look toward the guests who had laughed at him moments earlier. He simply told Mateo to go home to his family. Charlotte watched Eli cross the room with Lucy beside him, and for the first time, she wondered not how a poor mechanic had embarrassed Malcolm, but how a poor mechanic knew the architecture of a classified navigation system better than the engineers who built it. By Friday night, the question of Eli's knowledge had become the quietest tension in the Ashford estate, but Charlotte had no time to pursue it. The marriage ceremony was already beginning. The board was gathering upstairs, and Malcolm had transformed every minute into a weapon. When Miriam raised the signed certificate and declared the marriage legal, the ballroom fell silent for only a breath. Then every phone in the room began to vibrate. One alert became 10. 10 became hundreds. Ashford Aeronautics stock was collapsing. "What did you do?" Charlotte demanded. Malcolm stood near the doors with his hands folded behind his back, wearing the patient smile of a man watching a bridge burn from the safe side of the river. "I protected the shareholders. You released the report." The numbers released themselves. Across the ballroom, investors abandoned their champagne and rushed toward the exits. Reporters shouted questions through the opening doors. Television screens near the bar switched to financial coverage, where a red line dropped across the chart like a wound. Ashford Aeronautics had lost 28% of its value in 11 minutes. Charlotte seized a tablet from an assistant and scanned the report. Missing reserves, hidden liabilities, billions in projected losses. Every page carried her authorization, yet she had never seen any of it. "These signatures are false," she said. Malcolm leaned closer. "The market does not care what is true. It cares what it believes first." Upstairs, the board called an emergency vote. Downstairs, the wedding guests watched Charlotte's empire begin to disappear before the cake had been cut. Eli stood beside Lucy, his face calm, but his old phone vibrated again inside his jacket. He stepped away and read the message. "Mr. North, we can stabilize the stock within 60 seconds. Authorization required." One word from him could have stopped the fall. One word could have exposed his reach, protected Charlotte, and ended Malcolm's game before midnight. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he looked through the glass doors toward the elevators. Malcolm's assistant was carrying 2 document cases upstairs, moving too quickly and watching the cameras too carefully. Eli understood. The report was not the crime. It was the curtain. If he stopped the collapse now, Malcolm would destroy whatever evidence those cases contained and claim the market panic had been an innocent mistake. "Do it," Charlotte said behind him. Eli turned. "Do what?" "Whatever you did with the navigation system. Find the flaw. Tell me how to fix this." Her voice was controlled, but fear had entered her eyes. Not fear for the mansion or the company name. Fear for the workers whose futures were tied to every falling number. Eli slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Not yet." Charlotte stared at him. "Not yet? My company is bleeding value by the second. If you move before you know where the knife is, you only drive it deeper. This is not one of your repair jobs." "No," Eli said quietly. "Machines are more honest." The boardroom doors opened above them, and Miriam appeared at the railing. "Charlotte, they are ready to vote." Malcolm extended his hand toward the staircase as though inviting her to surrender with dignity. Charlotte looked once at Eli, waiting for an answer he could not give without losing the truth they still needed. He wanted to tell her that he could buy every share Malcolm sold. He wanted to tell her that the banks calling for payment were waiting for Eli's permission. Instead, he gave her the only promise he could safely make. "Walk into that room," he said. "Do not resign." Charlotte's eyes hardened. "And you?" Eli glanced toward Malcolm's document cases disappearing behind the upper doors. "I am going to find out who deserves your trust." She climbed the staircase alone, believing the poor man she had married was powerless, while Eli sent a single message from the shadows. "Do not stop the collapse. Track every account Malcolm touches." The board voted at 11:17. That night, Charlotte Ashford was suspended as chief executive officer, stripped of access to company accounts, and ordered to leave the estate before morning because the property belonged to the corporate trust, not to her. Malcolm delivered the decision with the gentle voice of a man pretending cruelty was procedure. "You can appeal after the investigation. You manufactured the investigation. Then prove it." The board members avoided her eyes. Beyond the windows, rain blurred the lights of Cleveland. while the last wedding guest slipped away without saying goodbye. Charlotte stood at the head of the table in her white dress, still wearing a wedding ring that felt less like a promise than evidence from a crime scene. "Where will you go?" Miriam asked quietly. Charlotte opened her mouth, then stopped. Her penthouse belonged to the company. Her accounts had been frozen. The friends who had celebrated her success were suddenly unavailable. Before she could answer, Eli appeared in the doorway with Lucy asleep against his shoulder. "She is coming with us." Malcolm laughed. "To the repair shop?" Eli looked at him with such stillness that the laughter died alone. "Some homes are smaller than others. That does not make them less safe." An hour later, Charlotte sat in the passenger seat of Eli's old pickup, her wedding dress hidden beneath a borrowed wool coat. The heater rattled. Rain tapped the windshield. Lucy slept in the back seat with her repaired rabbit beneath her chin. Charlotte stared at the dark road. "You knew this would happen. I knew Malcolm wanted the vote. You told me not to resign. You did not. And now I have nothing." Eli kept both hands on the wheel. "You have a name, a mind, and 42,000 people who still need someone to fight for them. That sounds noble when it is not your life collapsing." He said nothing. 2 sentences passed between them. Then only the engine, the rain, and the soft breathing of a child filled the cab. By the time they reached Eli's small house, dawn was beginning to pale the sky. The porch leaned slightly. One shutter needed paint. Inside, the rooms were warm with old wood, family photographs, and the faint smell of coffee grounds. Charlotte stood in the kitchen while Eli heated canned soup and toasted bread in a dented skillet. "This is what you eat?" she asked. "Tonight, yes. You could have taken my money. Then it would not have been mine." Lucy woke and wandered in wearing Eli's oversized sweater. Without hesitation, she pulled out a chair for Charlotte and placed the Red Bull in front of her. "That one has no chips," she said. Charlotte looked down at the soup as if no one had ever served her anything so carefully. Later, Eli braided Lucy's hair for school, packed her lunch, and slipped a handwritten note beside her apple. Charlotte watched from the doorway. There were no assistants, no schedules, no cameras. Only a father making certain his daughter felt loved before the world asked anything from her. That afternoon, Lucy returned with a drawing of 3 figures beneath a crooked yellow roof. She handed it to Charlotte. "That is Daddy. That is me. And that is you." Charlotte swallowed. "Why am I there?" Lucy shrugged. "Because you looked lonely." For the first time since losing the company, Charlotte did not think about Malcolm, the board, or the billions disappearing from the market. She looked at Eli washing dishes beneath the warm kitchen light and understood something that frightened her more than failure. She was beginning to care for a man when she believed he had nothing to offer her but dignity, truth, and a place at his table. For 3 days, Charlotte lived inside Eli's small house as though she had stepped into a life that asked nothing from her except honesty. She helped Lucy with math homework, answered calls from loyal Ashford employees on a borrowed phone, and watched Eli leave before sunrise to work at the repair shop. Each evening, he returned with grease on his hands and calm in his voice, never mentioning the fortune she had lost or the questions he had refused to answer. Then, on Thursday afternoon, while searching the hallway cabinet for an envelope, Charlotte found a locked metal box behind a stack of winter blankets. The key was resting beneath it, almost as if someone had stopped hiding the truth halfway through. Inside lay an old passport, a photograph of Eli beside Theodore Ashford, and legal papers bearing a name she had never seen before. Elias Bennett North. Her breath stopped. The man in the passport was younger, dressed in a dark tailored suit, standing beside leaders whose faces Charlotte recognized from financial magazines and government hearings. Before she could read further, her phone rang. Malcolm's voice came through smoothly. "You finally found it." Charlotte gripped the passport. "How did you know?" "Because I wanted you to." A file appeared in her messages. Northstar Dominion had purchased Ashford Aeronautics debt through 12 separate holding companies. Every trail led back to Elias North. "He did not marry you to save the company," Malcolm said. "He married you to own it." Charlotte ended the call without answering, but doubt had already entered the room. That evening, rain swept across the yard as Eli's truck pulled into the driveway. He saw Charlotte standing beneath the porch light, the passport in her hand, and stopped before reaching the steps. "Who is Elias North?" she asked. Eli looked at the document, then at her face. "Where is Lucy?" "At Nora's house." "Good. Do not change the subject." The rain struck the roof in hard, steady beats. Eli removed his work gloves and placed them on the porch rail. That name belonged to a life I left behind. Northstar Dominion owns my company's debt. It owns the debt, not your company. You bought it while pretending to be a poor mechanic. I never pretended to be anything. Charlotte stepped into the rain. You let me believe you had nothing. Eli followed slowly, his voice remaining quiet. You decided what I had by looking at my truck. Did you marry me to take Ashford? No. Then tell me why your name is connected to every bank trying to control it. He hesitated, and that pause wounded her more deeply than a lie. I cannot tell you everything yet. You expect trust after this? I expect nothing. Water ran from Charlotte's hair onto the collar of her coat. Was any of it real? The shop? This house? The way you looked at me? Eli's face changed then, not with anger, but with the tired grief of a man. Reaching a door he had hoped would stay closed. My wife died after someone learned who I was and tried to reach me through my family. Lucy received threats before she was old enough to read them. I buried the name to keep her safe. Charlotte's voice softened for one breath. Why did you not tell me? Because secrets do not become harmless just because love makes us impatient. Love? She whispered. Eli looked at her as though the word had escaped before he could stop it. Charlotte held up the passport. You asked me to trust a man who never told me his real name. I showed you who I am every day, Eli said. You are only asking what I own. Silence settled between them beneath the rain. Charlotte removed her wedding ring and placed it in his palm. I do not know which part of you is true. Eli closed his fingers around the ring. Then I failed to make the most important part clear. He entered the house, packed one bag for himself and one for Lucy, and left before midnight. Charlotte remained on the porch long after his taillights disappeared, holding the photograph of Eli and Theodore, while the small house behind her felt emptier than the mansion ever had. The emergency shareholder meeting began at 10 o'clock Friday morning inside the highest conference room of Ashford Tower, where the city stretched beneath walls of glass and Malcolm Rourke stood at the head of the table as though the company already belonged to him. Charlotte entered alone. No assistant followed her. No attorney carried her files. The directors who once rose when she entered now kept their eyes on the polished table. Malcolm smiled. You came to watch the transfer. I came to hear you admit what you did. Truth is a luxury for people who still have power. He lifted the final acquisition papers. Northstar Dominion has called the debt. Ashford Aeronautics will be sold, divided, and restructured by noon. Charlotte felt 42,000 lives behind those words. Factory workers, engineers, parents, people who would never sit in a room like this, but would pay for every decision made inside it. Before Malcolm could call the vote, Miriam Sloan entered carrying Theodore Ashford's leather-bound file. There is one final statement from the trust. Malcolm's smile vanished. That document has no authority. Then you should have nothing to fear. Miriam opened a sealed letter and began to read. Years earlier, when Ashford Aeronautics stood days from bankruptcy, an unknown investor had paid its debts, protected its workers, and refused public credit. Theodore had later learned that the investor was Elias Bennett North, founder of Northstar Dominion. He had chosen Eli for Charlotte not because of his wealth, but because Eli was the only powerful man Theodore had ever met who did not need to control her. The room went still. Then the conference doors opened. Eli walked in wearing the same dark suit he had worn at the engagement party. Lucy was not with him. This time, he had come not as a father seeking shelter, but as the man every bank in the room answered to. Executives stood. Two directors lowered their heads. Malcolm stared at him as if the floor had shifted beneath his feet. This is impossible. Eli placed a thin black folder on the table. No, what you did was careless. He displayed the accounts Malcolm had used to short Ashford's stock, the false reports created through his office, and the transfers hidden behind overseas shell companies. Every move had been tracked from the moment Eli allowed the stock to fall. Malcolm's own signatures completed the chain. Federal investigators entered quietly from the hallway. No one shouted. No one needed to. Malcolm looked toward Charlotte. He planned all of this. Eli met his eyes. I did not create your greed. I only gave it enough room to reveal itself. The investigators escorted Malcolm from the room while the directors sat frozen in silence. Then Eli turned to Charlotte. Northstar Dominion will forgive the emergency debt. Relief moved across her face, but he raised one hand. Ashford Aeronautics will not belong to me. He signed a second document transferring the controlling shares into a permanent employee trust. Every worker, from the factory floor to the engineering offices, would now hold a protected stake in the company's future. Charlotte stared at him. You could own all of it. Ownership is not the same as stewardship. And what happens to me? Eli placed the executive authority papers before her. You decide whether you deserve their trust. She looked at the signature, then at the man she had accused of deception. He had saved her company without taking her freedom. He had exposed Malcolm without humiliating her. He had possessed enough power to command the room, yet used it only to return power to people who had never been invited inside. Eli stepped back from the table. I did not save your throne, Charlotte, he said quietly. I saved the people standing beneath it. No one applauded. The truth was too large for applause. For several long seconds, the richest and most powerful people in the building sat without a word, while Charlotte finally understood that the man she had called poor had always possessed the one kind of wealth none of them could purchase: the dignity to give power away. Charlotte did not follow Eli when he left Ashford Tower. She understood that an apology offered beneath the eyes of directors and attorneys would still belong partly to the company, and what she owed him had nothing to do with business. For the next 2 weeks, she rebuilt Ashford Aeronautics under the employee trust, reopened the facilities Malcolm had marked for closure, and met with workers whose names had never appeared in her executive reports. She listened more than she spoke. She learned that respect was not something a title created. It was something a person practiced when no one important was watching. On a quiet Saturday evening, Charlotte drove alone to Lucy's elementary school, where folding chairs filled a small auditorium and paper stars hung from the ceiling. Eli sat in the third row wearing a plain blue shirt, saving one seat beside him for no one. Lucy stood backstage preparing to read a poem she had written about home. Charlotte entered without an assistant, security detail, or jewelry beyond the wedding ring Eli had returned through Miriam. She took the last seat in the back. When Lucy stepped beneath the warm stage light, her voice trembled at first. A home is not the biggest house, she read. It is the place where someone stays when your life gets small. Eli lowered his eyes. Charlotte felt the words settle inside every empty room she had carried for years. After the program, she found them near the playground beneath a row of bare trees. Eli saw her, but did not move closer. The company is safe, Charlotte said. I heard. The workers own it now. That was always the point. She opened her handbag and removed their marriage contract. The pages were torn cleanly through the signatures. Our first marriage protected my company, she said. I do not want another contract. Eli remained silent. I judged your life by your clothes, your truck, and the size of your house. Then I judged your truth by the secrets you carried to protect your daughter. I was wrong both times. Charlotte, please let me finish. The evening wind moved softly through the empty swings. Lucy stood nearby holding her father's hand, watching with the serious expression children wear when adults finally speak honestly. Charlotte placed the ring in Eli's palm. I am not asking the richest man alive to come back. I am asking the father who repaired a cloth rabbit, defended a worker everyone else ignored, and gave me a place at his table when I had nowhere to go. I am asking for a second chance to become someone worthy